The first thing I saw when I turned onto my street was a rental truck in front of my house. Its back door was open. A man in a faded blue shirt was carrying a box past my hydrangeas, as if he had every right in the world to step over the cracked path I had meant to repair that spring. For a moment, I assumed it was my neighbor's truck. Then I saw my father standing on my porch with my spare key in his hand. My sister Tessa was inside. I could see her through the front window. She was holding a stack of plates from the kitchen cabinet, looking around with the careful, hopeful expression people get when they are trying to believe a place belongs to them. "Dad," I said. "What is going on?" He did not look embarrassed. That was the first thing that frightened me. If I had caught him making a mistake, he would have looked guilty. Instead, he looked relieved. "There you are," he said. "We were starting to wonder when you'd get back." I had been at a 3-day hospital operations conference in Chicago. I had told my parents I would be home Sunday afternoon. It was Saturday evening. The conference had ended early because a speaker was ill, and I had changed my flight. Apparently, that was the only reason I was seeing any of it before it was finished. "Why is there a truck outside my house?" I asked. Dad put the key into his pocket. "Tessa needs somewhere stable for a while. You know what her situation has been." I looked past him. My mother was at my dining table with a marker and a roll of labels. She had written Tessa's linens on one, and Tessa's kitchen on another. My mother had always organized things when she was anxious. When I was a child, she labeled our freezer bags before thunderstorms. The sight of those labels made my stomach drop. Tessa stepped onto the porch. She was 34, younger than me by 3 years, with blonde hair tied up in a loose knot and a tiredness around her eyes that had become permanent during the last year. Her daughter Ivy was asleep in the back seat of Tessa's car. "Mara," Tessa said, "I thought they told you." "They didn't tell me anything." My voice sounded calm. I did not feel calm. "Why are you moving into my house?" Tessa looked at our father. He answered for her. "This is temporary while she gets back on her feet. And it makes sense. You have the space. You travel for work. The upstairs room has been sitting there empty." The upstairs room had not been sitting empty. It was my office. My desk, my patient flow reports, my winter coats, the boxes of my grandmother's photographs I still had not sorted. But even if it had been empty, it would still have been mine. "You could have asked," I said. Dad sighed in the way he did when he wanted to make a disagreement sound childish. "Mara, this isn't about asking permission to borrow a lawn mower. Your sister is separating. Her landlord will not renew her lease. Ivy needs a room. Then help her find an apartment." We did. Nothing will take her with her credit right now. I looked at Tessa. "Did you know I didn't agree to this?" Her mouth opened and closed. "Mom said you knew I needed help. She said you didn't want a big conversation because you were at that conference." "That is not the same as agreeing." My mother came to the door holding a label sheet. "Don't make this ugly in front of Ivy." "I need everyone to stop bringing things into my house," I said. Dad's jaw tightened. "It isn't only your house anymore." For several seconds I did not understand him. Then he reached into the pocket of his jacket and unfolded a piece of paper. "Your mother had the authority," he said. "You signed it yourself." The paper had a county stamp at the top. I saw my name and the address of my house. Underneath was Tessa's name. My father called it transfer papers. That was when I understood they had not just let my sister stay. My parents had given my sister my house. The first moving man came back onto the porch for another box. He looked from me to Dad, sensing the change in the air. Dad gave him a little wave, the sort you give someone who is being paid by the hour. "Keep going," Dad said. I turned to the mover. "Please stop for a moment. This is my home, and I did not authorize this move," Dad said. "We have the paperwork." The mover did not inspect it. He looked at me. I understood that he had no way to know which of us was telling the truth. I did not want to make him a witness to a family collapse, but I could not let the move continue because Dad had chosen a confident voice. "Please take a 10-minute break," I said. "I will cover it if I have to." Dad moved closer. "You are embarrassing yourself." "No," I said. "I am asking people to stop entering my house." The mover walked toward the truck with his phone. My mother pressed her lips together. Tessa stood behind the screen door. looking as if she wanted to disappear. I called the non-emergency police line from the porch. I chose every word carefully. I said there was a dispute over access to my residence, that family members had begun moving property in while I was away, and that I had been shown a deed I had not authorized. The dispatcher asked whether anyone was threatening me. I said no. She asked if I wanted an officer. I looked at Dad, who was staring at me with disbelief, as if a woman calling for a neutral person was a greater betrayal than a parent transferring her house. I said yes. But he said that where there was an active dispute, no one should bring in another item that night. Dad began to argue. The officer held up a hand. I am not telling anyone who owns this house. I am telling you that continuing a move right now is likely to make the situation worse. The movers packed their blankets and left. Tessa's boxes stayed in my foyer, office, and living room. Her couch remained tied inside the truck. Ivy woke in the back seat and began crying because she did not understand why the adults were all standing outside. For 1 second, I almost told Tessa she and Ivy could sleep in the house. Then I pictured the labels in my kitchen and Dad saying they had fixed the deed. A night would become a week. A week would become the story everyone expected me to accept. You and Ivy can stay at Mom and Dad's tonight, I said. Nothing else comes inside. Dad said, that is not your decision anymore. I looked at the officer, the paper, and finally at my father. It is until a court says otherwise. I did not know if those words were legally exact. I only knew I had spent years letting Dad define the room we were in. That night I stopped. I did not scream. I had spent most of my life learning how to become quiet when something hurt. In my family, Tessa had always been the one people rushed toward. I was the one who brought the right form, remembered a birthday, and stayed late after dinner to wash dishes. As an adult, mature often meant they expected me to absorb whatever would make everyone else uncomfortable. I bought the house when I was 32. It was a narrow 2-story place on a street lined with maples, with a crooked front path and a kitchen that looked as if it had been renovated by someone who hated drawers. The purchase price was $286,000. I know that number because I had written it in a notebook beside every shift I covered, every bonus I saved, and every weekend I declined because I wanted the down payment more than I wanted brunch. I worked in hospital operations. The job paid steadily, not extravagantly. The house was my biggest act of faith in my own future. My parents offered a loan, then reminded me how much they had offered when I declined it. I took that as the price of being independent. Over the next 5 years I replaced the roof, redid the bathroom, paid off the mortgage early after a promotion and some aggressive saving. I did not inherit the house. I did not marry into it. I did not receive it from anyone. I owned it because I had earned it, one unglamorous decision at a time. Tessa had made choices that did not work out. She left a retail job to start an event decorating business, then separated from a man who began missing child support payments. She fell behind on rent while trying to keep Ivy in the same school district. I had helped before. I paid for a car repair and a prescription when Ivy was sick. I loved my niece and my sister, even when loving her came with exhaustion. But help was supposed to be something I chose, not something my parents could take from me and call generous. On the porch, Dad kept talking as if I had not heard him clearly. Tessa will be safe here. She can get settled. You can stay in the guest room at our place for a few weeks if it makes you more comfortable. The guest room at my parents' house had a floral bedspread and a window that faced their driveway. He said it like he was offering me an equivalent exchange. You want me to leave my own house, I said. No one is throwing you out. Don't twist it. That sentence did something in me. It made the outline of the situation sharp. My father was not confused. He was asking me to accept a loss and then criticize myself for naming it. I took the paper from his hand. It was a copy, not the original. It said a deed had been recorded 2 days earlier. The grantor line read, Mara Ellis by Elaine Ellis, attorney in fact. The grantee was Tessa Ellis. My mother said, we used the power of attorney you gave me when you were away. It was for emergencies. This is an emergency. A housing problem is not permission to give away a house, I said. Dad folded his arms. You have no idea what it is like for Tessa right now. I looked at Ivy sleeping in the car. I knew exactly what fear looked like. I also knew it could be used to make any boundary sound cruel. I am not discussing this on the porch, I said. No more boxes come in tonight. Dad stepped between me and the door. Its floors creaked near the upstairs bathroom. The front window let in a ribbon of cold air every January. The back fence leaned after hard rain, and I had been promising myself for 2 years that I would get it straightened. I loved it because it was not impressive. It was proof that my life did not have to be provisional. Before I bought it, I rented apartments that felt temporary even after years. I kept dishes in their shipping boxes. I avoided hanging pictures because I did not want to patch holes when I left. I delayed furniture because I was always calculating whether it would fit through the next stairwell. The house changed small habits before it changed anything larger. I planted rosemary behind the garage. I kept a ladder in the basement. I bought a heavy blue chair because I could choose furniture without asking whether I would have to move it again in 11 months. My parents had seen the house differently from the beginning. Dad called it a lot of square footage for one person at the first holiday dinner after I moved in. Mom asked whether I had considered taking a roommate. I smiled and said no. I thought those comments were background noise. Families say things about money and space. I wanted them to be harmless, so I treated them as harmless. When I paid off the mortgage, I brought a small bakery cake to lunch with my parents. The bank's logo was printed in blue frosting. Dad congratulated me, then said it meant I would be in a position to help Tessa if she ever got into trouble. Tessa laughed. I laughed too. At the time, she was still running her event decorating business and showing us photos of weddings in barns with pale flowers and strings of lights. I was proud of her. I had no reason to imagine that my paid-off home had become, in Dad's mind, a reserve fund for her future. When her business slowed and her relationship began collapsing, I heard it in fragments. A utility bill, a missed child support payment, a landlord requesting proof of income. Dad hated uncertainty. He solved it by taking control of whatever he could reach. It was possible to understand why he panicked and still refuse what he did. From the grocery store parking lot, I called Tessa. She answered on the second ring. Where are you and Ivy sleeping? I asked. Mom and Dad's. Did you sign anything? There was a pause. Dad had me sign some lender forms last week. He said they were preliminary. I didn't understand all of them. My chest tightened. Do you have copies? Maybe. I can look. Do not sign anything else. Do not let Dad put anything in front of you without reading it. And do not throw away a message about the house. She sounded scared then. Mara, I thought you knew. I believed she had wanted to believe it. I did not yet know what she had ignored in order to do that. I didn't, I said. And I am going to find out exactly what they did. I left before I said something I could not take back. I drove to a hotel near the airport because I could not stand the thought of sitting in my parents' guest room while strangers carried my furniture upstairs. At the front desk, the clerk asked whether I wanted one key card or two. I nearly laughed. A plastic card for one night felt more honestly mine than the house I had lived in for 5 years. In my room, I put my suitcase on the bed and opened my laptop. I searched the county recorder's website, then entered my address. The portal was slow and ugly, designed by someone who assumed nobody would visit it until something had gone wrong. The first records were familiar. The 2018 warranty deed showing me as sole buyer, the original mortgage, the satisfaction of mortgage filed 2 years earlier, and the tax assessments. Just a chain of facts about a life I had built. Then I found the newest entry. It was a quitclaim deed recorded 48 hours earlier. The document claimed I had conveyed all my interest in the house to Tessa. It was signed in my mother's name, followed by the phrase attorney in fact for Mara Ellis. My hands went cold. I read it 3 times, looking for something that would turn it into a misunderstanding. There was no purchase amount. The consideration line said $10 and other good and valuable consideration, which I knew was routine language even when no meaningful money changed hands. The document did not say I had sold my house. It did not say I had consented. It simply presented the county with a signed deed and asked to be recorded. I called the recorder's office the next morning. The woman who answered was kind but firm. She explained that her office accepted documents that met filing requirements. They did not investigate family authority disputes. Recording a deed made it public. It did not guarantee the deed was valid. That sentence was the first solid thing I had heard since I saw the truck. She said a later corrective document might be recorded, but a dispute over authority required a real estate attorney. No county clerk could tell me whether ownership had changed. I called a colleague from work, Denise, whose husband handled commercial property. She did not try to solve it for me. She gave me the name of a local attorney named Priya Shah and told me to call before I spoke to my family again. Priya answered herself. I expected someone clinical and impatient. Instead, she asked me to slow down and begin with the facts I could prove. I told her when I bought the house that I was the only owner, that the mortgage was paid, and that my mother had a durable power of attorney. I told her my parents had moved Tessa in before I was told. I emailed her the recorded deed while we were on the phone. Do you have the power of attorney? She asked. My mother has the original. I have a scanned copy somewhere. Find it. Do not accept money. Do not sign a statement. Preserve text messages, voicemail, emails, and anything about the move. If a lender contacts you, tell them there is a title dispute and then send them to me. I asked whether signing the POA allowed my mother to do this. Priya said, a durable power of attorney gives only the authority written in it. Durability does not turn someone else into the owner of your property. After the call, I searched my files. The scanned POA was in a folder named Montreal Assignment, between a vaccination record and a hotel receipt. I opened it with my heart pounding. On page 7, there was a section titled Special Instructions. I had written them myself with the lawyer who prepared it. No sale, gift, transfer, refinancing, lien, mortgage, or other encumbrance of real property without Mara Ellis's specific written authorization. I read the words out loud in the quiet hotel room. Then I noticed an email from 2 days earlier. It was addressed to Tessa, my father, and a loan officer I did not know. The subject line was preliminary refinance questions. They had not only moved my sister into my house, they were trying to use it for money. The email chain had a calendar invitation for a call between Dad, Tessa, and the mortgage broker. The meeting happened Friday afternoon while I was in a conference ballroom, listening to someone explain winter capacity planning. Dad had written afterward, Tessa understands the next step. We will need enough to clear her cards, catch up the arrears, and create a cushion. Mara will appreciate that her sister is no longer dependent on her. I read that sentence until the words stopped looking like English. He had assigned me gratitude I had never felt, then used it to justify taking from me. I made a list because lists were the only way I knew to keep panic from spreading. The recorded deed, the lender email, original purchase documents, insurance policy, the officer's incident number, Tessa's forms, the moving company's invoice. I called the moving company the next morning. I did not ask them to take sides. I asked for the invoice and the name of the person who booked the move. The receptionist said Robert Ellis had booked it as a family relocation. She emailed the receipt. It did not prove ownership. It proved timing. Dad had scheduled a full household move before I came home, not a temporary stay after we had discussed it. I called my insurer next. I said there was a dispute involving an unauthorized deed, and that I remained in possession of the home. The representative noted the call and told me not to change residence or policy details until I had legal advice. At lunch, I asked Denise to meet me at a diner. I handed her the deed copy without speaking. She read it slowly. Your mother signed this? She asked. Under a power of attorney. Can she do that? I don't know yet. Denise pushed the paper back. Then do not let them make you decide the law in your kitchen. Get someone whose job is to know. That was when I stopped trying to win the argument before I had the facts. At the hotel, I read the Montreal folder again. Mom was named as agent because she was organized and lived nearby. Dad was successor agent only if Mom could not serve. Yet Dad's name appeared in every refinance email. He had become the architect of a transaction he was never authorized to manage. I printed the POA and placed it beside the recorded deed. One paper said my mother could help with bills and emergency repairs. The other said she had given my house away. The distance between them was the whole story. I met Priya at her office that afternoon. It was above a bakery on a street I had driven down 100 times without noticing. Her waiting room had gray chairs, a coffee machine, and a framed photograph of an old courthouse. Nothing about it felt dramatic, which helped. Priya read the recorded deed first. Then she read the power of attorney. She did not give me a theatrical speech. She underlined phrases and asked practical questions. Was your mother ever authorized in writing to transfer this house? No. Did you sign a deed? No. Did you tell Tessa she could own the property? No. Did you receive money for a sale? No. She nodded. The document is unusually clear. The POA authorizes administrative acts during your assignment. It specifically withholds authority to transfer or encumber real property. Your mother could have paid a tax bill. She could not gift your house to your sister. I asked why the deed had been recorded if it was so plainly outside the POA. Recording offices do not decide private disputes, she said. A recorded document can still be challenged. We need to move quickly because someone may try to borrow against the property. Priya showed me the preliminary lender email. It was not a loan approval. It was worse in a way. It showed intention. My father had emailed a mortgage broker from a personal address. He wrote that Tessa had recently received the home from family and wanted to explore a cash-out refinance. He estimated the house was worth more than $400,000. He asked whether some proceeds could be used to settle family obligations before closing. There was no mention of me. I felt the room tilt slightly. My parents had not planned to let Tessa occupy one bedroom while she recovered. They had planned to make the house an asset in her name, pull money from it, and leave me with whatever story they thought I would accept. What happens now? I asked. Priya said we would first send notice to the mortgage broker and any title company involved, telling them ownership was disputed, and that no transaction should proceed without her office. We would demand that Tessa and my parents stop representing that Tessa owned the house. We would ask for a corrective deed and an affidavit acknowledging the POA did not authorize the transfer. And if they refuse, then we file an action to quiet title. We can also ask the court to prevent any sale, refinance, or further transfer while the case is pending. It is not glamorous. It is paperwork, time, and evidence. But this is exactly what property records are for. I nodded, though I was still hearing my father's voice. We fixed that. At the end of the meeting, Priya said something I kept returning to. Your goal is not to punish them. Your goal is to make the title truthful again and stop further harm. Those are different things. Anger could get me through the first phone call. Could not be the strategy. I revoked the power of attorney that afternoon. Priya prepared the notice. I signed it, and her office sent copies to my parents, the county, my insurer, and the parties connected to the refinance inquiry. Then I opened the family group chat. There were messages from my mother sent while I was flying home. She had written, Tessa is finally going to have a secure place for Ivy. Please be happy for her. My father had replied with a thumbs up. No one had asked me a question. I typed one message before leaving the chat. Do not move another item into my house. Do not apply for financing. All communication about the property goes through Priya Shah. My mother called before I reached my car. I did not answer. She left a voicemail. Her voice was trembling with anger. You are making your sister's life harder, because you cannot stand not being the center of attention. Your father was trying to solve a problem. Call me when you are ready to be reasonable. I sat behind the wheel and listened to it twice. For the first time, I understood that reasonableness in my family had meant accepting a decision after everyone else made it. Priya asked how the POA had been created. The question was not suspicious. Context mattered when people later claimed a document meant more than it said. 2 years earlier, I had accepted a temporary Montreal assignment to help a partner hospital redesign its discharge process. I was excited and nervous. I did not want a burst pipe or insurance problem to become an international emergency. The lawyer had asked whether I wanted a broad financial power of attorney. I said no. He explained that broad instruments could authorize many financial acts, sometimes property acts if the language permitted it. I asked for a narrow document tied to the house. Mom had been in the room when I signed it. She said, "This is sensible. I will only use it if you need me." That memory made the betrayal sharper. She knew why it existed and what it excluded. Priya asked whether Mom had ever used it properly. I told her that a pipe froze while I was away. Mom called a plumber, sent me the invoice, and waited for approval before reimbursing herself. That was exactly how the arrangement was meant to work. That helps, Priya said. It shows the limited purpose was understood in practice. She asked about the notary stamp on the deed. I had never met the notary. Priya explained that a notary acknowledgement did not create authority, a signer did not possess. The notary verified execution. She did not rewrite the limits in the POA. Do we need to involve her? I asked. Not based on what we know. We focus on the people who knew the limits and acted anyway. I was relieved. I did not want the story to grow until it swallowed people who had nothing to do with the decision. I wanted the truth to stay specific. Before I left, Priya gave me a task. Make a chronology with dates, times, names, and sources. No conclusions. No adjectives. Just what happened and when. I did it at the hotel desk. Friday refinance call. Thursday deed recorded. Saturday morning. Moving company arrives. Saturday afternoon. I return early. Saturday evening. Officer recommends no further move. Sunday county search. Monday lawyer meeting. Writing it down turned chaos into a sequence. A sequence could be tested. It could not be dissolved by someone calling me emotional. I sent the chronology to Priya after midnight. Her reply arrived the next morning. This is clear. Keep doing exactly this. 2 days later, I went back to the house with Priya's letter in my bag. I had the right to be there. Saying that to myself before I opened my own front door felt ridiculous and necessary. The rental truck was gone. Tessa's things were everywhere. Her winter boots were by the radiator. Ivy's crayons were on my coffee table. Someone had moved my framed photograph of my grandmother from the entryway to the hall closet to make room for a picture of Ivy. It was a small thing, but it told the whole story. My family had not made space for Tessa inside my life. They had replaced parts of my life with hers. My parents were waiting in the kitchen. My mother had made coffee. She put a mug in front of me as if we were about to discuss a holiday schedule. Dad said, "We got your lawyer's letter. This has gotten out of hand. It got out of hand when you filed a deed I never approved. Your mother was your attorney, in fact. For taxes and emergencies. Not to give away my house." My mother folded her hands. Tessa needed stability. We did not have time to wait for you to come back from a conference and make a spreadsheet about it. You had time to call a moving company and a mortgage broker. I said. You had time to tell Tessa she owned my house. You had time to record a deed. You had time to ask me. Dad looked away. That was the closest he came to shame. Tessa came down the stairs. She had heard enough to understand she was being discussed. Ivy was watching cartoons in the den with headphones on. I didn't ask them to do all of this, Tessa said quietly. But you moved in, I said. She nodded. Mom said you knew. Dad said you were planning to sell eventually. They said it would be better if I had somewhere permanent. Did you ask me? Her eyes filled, but she did not look away. No. I was scared, Mara. I saw a way out and I believed them. That was honest enough to hurt. I could feel compassion for her fear, and still know she had chosen not to test the story she was given. Dad stepped forward. We are not going to put Tessa and Ivy on the street over a technicality. This is not a technicality. This is my home. You have savings. You have a job. You could buy another place. Tessa cannot. There it was. The family plan, stripped of its careful language. I had succeeded just enough to become the person whose things were available for redistribution. I said, "You do not get to decide that my work makes my home less mine." My mother said, "No one is saying that. You literally put it in her name." For a few seconds nobody spoke. The coffee maker clicked off behind us. Dad sat down. He looked tired, not cruel. He saw Tessa struggling and looked at me as someone who would survive the loss. He had decided survival was the same thing as consent. The house is worth over $400,000, he said. You paid less than $300. You have had years there. It is not like we are taking your future. I said, you are not allowed to calculate how much future I deserve. Priya's letter gave them 10 days to respond. I explained the options without threatening them. Tessa could sign a corrective deed returning any claimed interest. My parents could sign an affidavit acknowledging that the POA did not authorize the transfer. The refinance inquiry had to stop. If they cooperated, the process could be quieter and cheaper for everyone. Dad said he would not sign anything that made him look like he had done something wrong. I put the letter back in my bag. Then the records will have to speak for themselves, I said. As I left, I heard my mother tell Tessa that I was being cold. I did not turn around. I had finally learned that walking away was not the same as abandoning someone. Before I went back, Priya suggested I take someone with me. I chose Denise, not because I needed a witness to every word, but because I needed one person in the room who did not benefit from making me doubt myself. Denise waited in the car at first. I wanted one conversation alone with my family. The kitchen had the same pale cabinets I chose when I renovated, the same tea towel hanging crookedly near the sink. Yet I felt like I was sitting in someone else's house. Mom placed a mug in front of me. She had chosen my favorite, the blue one with a thin crack near the handle. The tenderness of that gesture almost made me accept the coffee. Then I remembered that tenderness and respect are not the same thing. Did you tell the moving company I had agreed? I asked Dad. He avoided the question. They did not need our family history. Did you tell Tessa I had agreed? We told her you wanted her safe. That isn't what I asked. Mom said. We knew what you would want if you were here. You knew what you wanted. Dad looked at the window. You have always been better at starting over than Tessa. The sentence was supposed to be praise. I heard the calculation underneath it. My ability to recover had become a reason they could injure me. I asked why they had used a quitclaim deed instead of talking to me. Dad said lawyers had made it sound simple. He said the family could make things right later. Priya had warned me that this argument would come. A bad legal choice presented as practical efficiency. Did you read the POA restrictions? I asked Mom. She looked at her hands. I knew it was limited. Then why did you sign? Her voice broke. Because she was scared. Because Ivy was scared. Because your father kept saying we had a way to fix it. For 1 second, I saw the version of my mother who worried through the night over sick children and unpaid bills. I also saw a grown woman choosing fear over my consent. Dad said, your mother did what she thought was best. For whom? I asked. No one answered. Tessa appeared on the stairs again. She had been listening. This time she did not stay silent. Dad told me Mara was thinking of selling, she said. He said the house would be mine before school started. Dad turned to her. Don't make this worse. It is already worse, Tessa said. That was the first crack in the alliance they had built around her need. It did not make her innocent. It made the situation more truthful. I told them I would not negotiate in the kitchen. Priya's letter gave them a straightforward way to correct the record. Tessa had a lawyer of her own if she wanted one. My parents could get advice. But no one was to ask me for a private compromise or a promise to forgive them before the property was secured. Mom asked, are you really going to take your own parents to court? I am going to make the title truthful again, I said. What happens next depends on whether you help or obstruct. When I walked out, Denise was standing by her car. She did not ask for details until we were driving. Then she said, you did not sound cruel. You sounded finished. I had never known those could be different things. Priya sent notices the next morning. The mortgage broker confirmed receipt but would not tell us much. A title company contacted Priya 2 days later, because they had been asked to perform a preliminary title review for a possible refinance. The title examiner had noticed the unusual POA deed and wanted the underlying document. Priya sent the complete limited power of attorney and a letter explaining that its explicit restrictions had been violated. By the end of the week, the refinance inquiry was paused. It should have made me feel better. Instead, I felt more exposed. The house had been safe because it was simple. I owned it. I paid the bills. I came home to it. Now every piece of that simplicity had to be proved to strangers. I went through old files after work. Closing documents, insurance declarations, roof receipts, and repair invoices. I had never imagined I would need ordinary records to defend myself against my own parents. The more evidence Priya gathered, the clearer the financial plan became. The broker's email showed Dad asking whether Tessa could borrow against the house before she had even spent a week living there. He mentioned credit card balances, past due rent, and a family repayment. He did not list the exact amount, but Priya estimated that a cash-out loan could have created a debt of more than $200,000 against a house I had spent years paying off. When I saw that number, my anger changed shape. I had imagined losing the house. I had not understood that they might have left me with a mortgage I never chose, all to solve a crisis they had hidden inside the word family. Dad emailed me directly. He wrote that the refinance was only an option, that no one had intended to put me at risk, and that I was letting lawyers turn a private matter into something ugly. I forwarded the email to Priya without replying. She called me that afternoon. He is trying to reframe intent, she said. Intent matters, but the documents matter more. Do not debate the meaning of his feelings. We need to establish the facts. That was harder than it sounded. Every time I saw my parents' names on my phone, I wanted to explain myself so thoroughly that they would finally understand. I wanted to show them every fear I had felt and make them admit it was reasonable. But understanding was not the thing they had withheld. Permission was. I slept at my friend Denise's apartment while the dispute was unresolved. She said, "Use the second bedroom. Do not apologize for taking up space." At work, I kept my life separate. I ran meetings about hospital capacity. I answered questions about staffing gaps. I approved contingency plans. People trusted me with complicated problems because I was steady under pressure. Then I would drive away and feel like I had failed a basic test of adulthood. How had I not seen what my parents were capable of? Priya corrected me when I said that. Trusting your parents was not a failure, she said. The legal document was limited because you had considered risk. You did something prudent. They ignored the limit. The next message that came was from Tessa. Can we meet alone? No, Mom. No, Dad. I need to tell you what they said. I stared at it for 10 minutes before writing back. Yes. Tomorrow. Somewhere public. The lender pause did not end the danger. Priya explained that once an improper deed is recorded, the goal is not merely to stop the next transaction. The goal is to repair the chain of title so that a future buyer, insurer, or lender does not have to guess whether a family dispute will return. She asked me to think ahead. Did I want to sell soon? No. Did I need a loan? No. Did I plan to refinance? No. That did not mean the cloud on title was harmless. A clean title was part of owning a home, even if I never moved again. Dad used that fact against me in an email. He wrote that because I did not intend to sell, there was no urgency. He suggested that we let Tessa stay until she was financially stable, and then work out the paperwork later. Later was one of Dad's favorite words. Later meant after the pressure had changed my answer. Later meant after people had grown used to a thing that should not have happened. I showed Priya the email. She highlighted the phrase "let Tessa stay." He still frames this as his decision to grant, she said. That is useful evidence of the underlying assumption, but it is also a reminder. Do not negotiate from his language. At work, I found myself noticing systems that relied on unspoken assumptions. A nurse thought a physician had updated a discharge plan. A physician thought the nurse had. A patient waited because nobody had written down the next action. I spent the day correcting gaps that existed because people assumed rather than confirmed. It made me angry in a new way. My own family had made the same kind of error, except it was not accidental. They built a plan around an assumption they had every reason to know was false. I called my bank and asked them to put a note on my accounts that no one else could obtain information or initiate transactions. I had never added my parents, but I wanted the record clear. Then I called the county tax office to make sure mailing addresses had not been changed. They had not. Each call was boring. Each one made me breathe easier. The moving company sent a fuller invoice. Dad had paid for packing supplies, 2 movers, and a full-day truck. The order included a line for disassembling a bed and transporting a dining set. It was a place with scratched wooden tables and music, just loud enough to make private conversations feel less exposed. Tessa arrived early. She had a notebook in front of her but no coffee. Her hands were wrapped around each other so tightly that her knuckles were pale. I know you do not owe me this meeting, she said. Then do not waste it. She nodded. I had expected her to defend herself. Instead, she pulled out her phone. Dad started talking about your house a month ago, she said. After the landlord told me he would not renew. He said Mom had the power of attorney and that you were probably going to sell soon anyway. He said you had been talking about moving closer to the hospital. I had once mentioned casually that a shorter commute might be nice. I had never put my house on the market. I had never asked anyone to explore selling it. Tessa scrolled through messages. Dad had written, "Your sister does not need all that space. We can make this work for you and Ivy." Another said, "Don't call Mara yet. Your mother wants the paperwork handled first." I read it twice. "Did you think that was normal?" I asked. Tessa's face crumpled. "No. I thought it was strange. But I was panicking. I had 3 weeks left on my lease. I had a notice from the school about Ivy's address. My ex had missed 2 payments. Dad said he had already spoken to you. I wanted to believe someone had solved it. So you did not ask me because you were afraid I would say no." She looked directly at me then. Yes. It was the most honest thing she had said. I respected her for it and hated that I had to. Tessa told me Mom had been gentler about the plan. Mom said Mara will complain at first, but she loves you. Dad had been the one who used words like permanent and asset. He had said that once the house was in Tessa's name, she could rebuild credit and get enough money from a refinance to clear the debts that were suffocating her. "Did they tell you I would get any of the money?" I asked. Tessa shook her head. "Dad said you had savings. He said you would be fine." Something in my picture of my father changed permanently. His story made my competence a reason I deserved less protection. Tessa slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of messages and an email draft Dad had asked her to send to the mortgage broker. She had not sent it. The draft described her as the homeowner and asked about using equity to consolidate debt. "I don't want the house," she said. "Not like this. You moved into it." "I know. I am not asking you to forgive me because I feel guilty. I am telling you I will sign whatever I need to sign." I told her that signing something would help, but it would not erase every problem. A corrective deed could return any interest she claimed, but because the POA deed had created a title issue, Priya might still need a court order or a recorded settlement to make the title clean enough for a future buyer or lender. Tessa nodded. She did not pretend she understood the legal details. She asked what she should do about Ivy. I said, "Find a place you can afford. I will help you look. I will not let Dad turn my house into a solution for decisions he made without me." She whispered, "I know." For the first time since the truck arrived, I believe she did. When I left the coffee shop, I sent the messages to Priya. The evidence did not make me feel triumphant. It made me sad. The story had not begun with one bad decision on a porch. It had been growing in private conversations for weeks while I was invited to family dinners and asked about my work. They had planned my sacrifice as if I were not a person who would ever need to know. Tessa also told me that Dad had asked her not to tell anyone about the lender call. He said the family would look bad if people thought they were fighting over a house. She had agreed because she did not want to be the person who caused a fight. "That is how he gets people to keep his secrets," I said before I could stop myself. She did not argue. "I know." She opened a notes app and showed me a list she had been keeping. Dates. Amounts she owed. Calls with Dad. The date he took her to the notary. The day Mom brought her a set of keys and said the house was settled. "Why did you write this down?" I asked. "Because I felt sick," she said. "I thought if I wrote it down, I would either see that it made sense or I would have to admit it didn't." The list was incomplete, but it was useful. It showed Dad had been talking about the refinance before the deed was recorded. It showed Tessa asked whether I had signed something. Dad replied, "Your mother handles those details. It is not your concern." "You knew it should concern you," I said. "Yes." We sat with that. I did not want an apology that gave her relief and handed me the work of comforting her. I wanted an adult answer from an adult sister. "What are you going to do now?" I asked. "I will give Priya everything. I will sign the corrective deed. And I will find an apartment. Even if Mom and Dad tell you not to?" She swallowed. "Especially if they tell me not to." That was a decision, not a feeling. I trusted it more. Before we left, she asked whether I would tell Ivy why they had to move. I said no. Ivy was 6. She needed to know only that adults had made a mess, and that she was going to have a new home where she was safe. Tessa nodded. "I don't want her to learn that being scared means she can take from someone else." I thought about the way our parents had used her fear as a shield. I said, "Then do not teach her that." Outside the coffee shop, Tessa reached toward me then stopped. I did not hug her. Not yet. But I did not walk away as fast as I could either. When I got back to the hotel, Priya called. The title company had asked whether Tessa would execute a corrective deed voluntarily. I told her yes, likely. That helps, Priya said. But it does not solve the parents' part. We still need a record explaining the lack of authority and confirming title. Can Tessa just sign the house back? She can sign away whatever interest the deed purported to give her. But we also need to resolve the question of whether the original transfer was effective. A future title examiner needs more than a family promise. I understood. My life had been appended by a document that looked official to anyone who did not know the story. The correction had to be equally clear. That night, I stopped feeling as if I had one adversary. Tessa had made a selfish choice. My parents had designed the scheme. Those truths could exist together. The difference did not excuse anyone. Told me where to put my energy. Priya's formal demand went out the following Monday. It was 12 pages long, calm in the way only serious documents can be calm. It explained the title chain. It quoted the exact POA restrictions. It included the timeline of recording, move-in and refinance inquiry. It demanded that my parents and Tessa preserve all communications, stop representing Tessa as owner, stop pursuing financing, and cooperate with a stipulated correction of title. Tessa signed her corrective deed quickly. She also signed a statement acknowledging that she had never received my permission to acquire the house and had relied on what our parents told her. My parents refused. Dad wrote that he would not sign an affidavit accusing himself of fraud. Priya had not accused him of a crime. The letter said he had acted without authority. He could not bear the distinction because either way the document would make his decision visible. Mom wrote me a longer email. She said she had spent nights worrying about Tessa and Ivy. She said she had believed the POA allowed her to act in my best interests, and that keeping my sister housed was in the family's best interests. She said I was turning a mistake into a permanent wound. I read it 5 times. Then I notice what it did not contain. It did not say I am sorry I transferred your home. It did not say I should have asked. It did not say I understand why you feel unsafe. It said mistake as if the injury were an accident. It said family, as if that word could convert my house into common property. I wrote a reply and deleted it. I wrote another and deleted that too. Finally, I sent 3 sentences. You did not make a housing arrangement. You used a limited POA to transfer property. You were explicitly forbidden to transfer. The next steps are legal because you refused the simple corrective steps. I will not discuss this outside counsel. After I sent it, I shook for almost an hour. Boundaries often felt lonely. Every time I doubted myself, I opened the POA again. Its language made the betrayal less confusing. Priya filed the quiet title action when the deadline expired. The complaint asked the court to declare that the attempted transfer was unauthorized and ineffective, confirm my ownership, and prevent any sale, refinance, or further transfer while the case was pending. I hated seeing my parents' names on court papers. I hated the possibility that people in a courthouse would read family messages I had once thought were private. But the point of the case was not exposure. The point was to clear a record that could follow me for years. The court scheduled an early hearing on temporary relief. Before that hearing, Priya received a call from the title company. They had declined to move forward with any refinance. The POA restrictions were too explicit, and the ownership dispute was too serious. Dad called me 6 times that night. I let each call go to voicemail. The 7th time he left a message. You have made us look like criminals, he said. I hope you are proud of yourself. I listened until the end. Then I saved it to the folder Priya had told me to keep. That was the moment I stopped hoping my parents would give me the version of the story where they understood. I did not need their understanding to protect my home. I needed the documents, the court, and the ability to stop mistaking guilt for responsibility. Priya asked whether I wanted to seek reimbursement for every expense. Hotel nights, legal fees, the moving dispute, time away from work. I said I did not know. She said, you do not need to decide every consequence today. But do not waive anything because you are tired of being called difficult. That was exactly what I had been tempted to do. I wanted the title clean enough that I could return home and pretend none of it had happened. A fast, vague agreement would have served that desire. It would also have taught my parents that holding out long enough made my boundaries negotiable. So I told Priya to include costs that directly came from correcting the record, recording fees, title work, and the reasonable legal work required to undo the unauthorized transfer. I did not ask for money to make the pain feel balanced. Money could not do that. Dad reacted to the demand by sending a message to my Aunt Helen. I learned about it because Helen called me, uncomfortable and confused. "Your father says you are trying to charge them for helping Tessa," she said. I took a breath. "I am asking them to pay the costs created by recording a deed they had no authority to sign." Helen was quiet. Then she said, "Did you give them permission?" "No." "Then I do not see why he expects you to absorb the cost." Her simple answer steadied me. I had been so used to the family's language that I forgot how the facts sounded to someone outside it. Mom's response was different. She sent a photograph of Ivy sleeping on an air mattress at their house. The message beneath it said, "This is what your legal action is doing." I stared at the photo, furious at the cruelty of it. Ivy was not sleeping on an air mattress because I had filed anything. She was sleeping there because her grandparents had promised a house that was not theirs to promise. I did not reply. I forwarded the message to Priya and saved it. The next morning Tessa called. She had seen Mom send the photograph because Mom had mentioned it with pride, as if evidence of a child's discomfort would force me to give in. "I told her to stop," Tessa said. "I told her this is not Mara's fault." It was a small act, but it cost Tessa something. I could hear Mom talking loudly in the background before Tessa moved to another room. "I have an apartment viewing tomorrow," she said. "Can you come?" Not to choose it for me. I just don't trust myself to know what questions to ask. I said yes. I surprised myself. The apartment was not beautiful. It was above a pharmacy, with worn carpet in the hall and a narrow kitchen. But the bedroom windows faced a small playground, and the landlord spoke directly to Tessa about her income, references, and lease. Nobody spoke around her or made decisions over her head. She asked every question on the list Priya's paralegal had helped me make. Deposit amount, renewal terms, maintenance contact, utility responsibility. At the end she said she wanted one night to think. Outside she turned to me. "I should have asked questions before I moved into your house." "Yes," I said. "I am trying to learn." "Then keep doing that." The demand deadline passed 2 days later. My parents still would not sign. Priya filed the case. The first court hearing was brief. No one made speeches. Priya spoke clearly. My parents' attorney asked for time to review the documents and explore settlement. The judge entered an agreed temporary order that prevented anyone from selling, refinancing, leasing, or transferring the house while the case was pending. The order also required my parents and Tessa to stop representing that Tessa owned the property. When I left the courthouse, I felt empty. I had expected relief. Tessa called later that day. She had found a 2-bedroom apartment 20 minutes away. It was smaller than my house, but it was near Ivy's school and within the range of what she could afford once she started a new job with a local florist. "I need the deposit," she said. "I am not asking Dad. I am not asking you to co-sign. I just need to know if you meant what you said." I did mean it. I had offered to pay the first month's deposit directly to a landlord once the lease was approved. Not because Tessa was entitled to it, because I wanted the help I gave to be something I could live with afterward. We went through listings together on a video call. It was awkward. There were long pauses. She showed me photos of tiny kitchens and asked whether a second-floor unit would be difficult with Ivy's backpack and groceries. I answered honestly. It was the closest we had come to being sisters in weeks. My parents treated my offer as proof that I could have solved everything without lawyers. They were wrong. I could help Tessa find a place. I could not allow them to decide that helping meant forfeiting my property. Dad wanted wording that said everyone had misunderstood the document. Priya rejected it because a vague correction could leave room for future arguments and fail to satisfy a title insurer. The final proposal was precise. Tessa's corrective deed would be recorded. My mother and father would sign a sworn affidavit stating that the POA did not authorize the transfer, and that I had not given separate written authority. The court would enter a stipulated judgment confirming that I remained the sole owner. Each side would pay its own legal fees. except my parents would reimburse the recording costs and title work caused by the improper deed. There was no massive payout. There was no public humiliation. There was a record that matched the truth. Dad resisted until his attorney explained that continuing would cost more and likely make the result worse. I was not present for that conversation, but I could imagine how he heard it. He did not change his mind because he finally understood me. He changed it because the evidence left him nowhere else to stand. The documents were signed on a Thursday afternoon. Tessa signed first. My mother signed next. Dad signed last. Priya called me after the courthouse clerk accepted the stipulated judgment. "It is done," she said. "The title is confirmed in your name." I sat at my kitchen table while she said it. My kitchen. The table had a faint ring on it from a plant I had forgotten to move after watering. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, someone was walking a dog down the street. Nothing looked different. That was the point. My home had returned to being ordinary. But Tessa and Ivy still needed to move out. The temporary order and settlement gave them 30 days. I did not shorten it, even though every day felt invasive. I wanted the boundary to be firm, not cruel. My mother said 30 days was heartless. I told her Tessa had known for weeks that the house was not hers. I told her a signed lease was waiting. I told her I would pay the deposit directly when Tessa delivered the lease. Mom said, "You could let this go." I said, "I did let something go. I let go of the idea that you would protect me." She was silent for so long that I thought the call had dropped. Then she said goodbye. The filing itself was a stack of papers and a long wait in Priya's conference room. She showed me the complaint before it went out. It described my home by parcel number and legal description, not by the rooms I loved or the work I put into it. That formality made me unexpectedly sad. A lawsuit needed boundaries. It could not say that my father had given my spare key to my sister while I stood in the driveway. It could not say what it felt like to see labels in my kitchen. It could only say that a limited agent executed a deed beyond granted authority, and that the resulting record clouded title. Still, those words mattered. They were a way of translating injury into something a court could fix. At the hearing, the judge asked questions about whether there was an immediate risk of a sale or loan. Priya pointed to the broker emails. My parents' lawyer said the refinance had not proceeded. Priya said that was because the title company had been notified, not because my parents voluntarily stopped. The judge did not scold anyone. She entered an order preserving the status quo. No transfer. No loan. No lease. No representations that Tessa owned the house. The order was temporary, but it ended the most dangerous part of the uncertainty. Afterward, Dad tried to speak to me in the hallway. Priya stepped back but stayed close enough that I did not feel cornered. "You wanted a judge to hear this," Dad said. "Congratulations." I said. "I wanted the refinance stopped. It was only a conversation." "Then why did you hide it?" His face changed. For a moment, he looked old and frightened. Then he said, "You have no idea what it is like to watch your child struggle." I said, "You are watching your child struggle right now." He had no answer. We stood in the courthouse hallway while people walked around us carrying ordinary folders and cups of coffee. The settlement began moving after that. Tessa signed the corrective deed at a title office with her own notary, and a lawyer Priya recommended for independent advice. She was not forced. The lawyer explained that the deed did not make her liable for the mortgage because there was no mortgage, and that it returned any interest she claimed under the earlier transfer. Mom signed an affidavit later that week. It stated that the POA did not contain authority to convey or gift my real estate, and that I had not issued a separate written authorization. Dad refused for another 4 days. The move-out date approached. Tessa signed a lease for the apartment above the pharmacy. I paid the first month's deposit directly to the landlord as promised. I did not co-sign. I did not put utilities in my name. I did not leave a door open for the old arrangement to reappear under a Kinder label. On the last day, Ivy carried a small paper box out to the car. She told me it held her important things. A stuffed rabbit, 3 rocks, and a drawing of a yellow house. "Is this your house?" she asked me. "Yes," I said. "Do you live here all the time?" "I do now." She nodded, satisfied by an answer she could understand. The morning after the last box left, I asked Priya whether I should change the locks immediately. She said yes. The court order and title documents protected the legal record, but access was a practical question. There was no reason to leave old keys circulating while emotions were still raw. I hired a locksmith from the neighborhood. He arrived in a white van with a coffee cup in one hand and a ring of keys clipped to his belt. He did not know my story. He only asked how many exterior doors I had, and whether I wanted the garage keypad reset. I said yes to everything. While he worked, I stood in the front hall and watched him remove the old deadbolt. It was the lock I installed the first year I lived there, after a storm had jammed the original one. Dad had helped me choose it at the hardware store. He had said, "Get something solid. You never want to think about whether a door will hold." The memory almost made me stop the locksmith. Then I realized the lesson was still true. I wanted something solid. I simply no longer accepted that Dad got to decide who stood on the other side of it. The locksmith handed me 3 new keys. Want extras? I thought of all the spare keys I had given out casually. My parents. Tessa years ago when I traveled. Denise after a winter pipe scare. I asked for 4. 1 for me, 1 for the lockbox in my office, 1 for Denise, and 1 to keep sealed with my estate documents. No key for my parents. I felt the absence of that choice before I made it. Later that afternoon, Mom called. She did not know I had changed the locks. She said Dad wanted to come by to pick up a lamp he believed belonged to them. There was no lamp. Dad had given it to me when I moved in. I knew exactly which one Mom meant. A brass floor lamp in the reading corner. The request was not about the lamp. It was a test of whether they could still summon me into an argument inside my own house. "If you believe you own something, send me a photo and tell me when you gave it to me," I said. "I will look." Mom sighed. "You are making everything so formal. That is what I need right now." She did not send a photo. Dad did not come. That evening I cleaned the rooms Tessa had used. Not because I thought she had left them dirty, but because I wanted to reclaim the rhythm of the house. I washed the sheets in the guest room, wiped the kitchen shelves, and moved my grandmother's photograph back to the entryway. On the bottom shelf of the hall closet, I found a folded piece of paper. It was one of Tessa's apartment listings. She had circled a 2-bedroom unit above a pharmacy and written in the margin, "Ask Mara what questions to ask." I stood there holding it. The note did not erase what she had done. It reminded me that people can make a wrong choice and still be capable of learning what a right one requires. I put the paper in an envelope with the rest of Tessa's forwarded mail. Then I went upstairs and opened every window for 10 minutes, even though it was cold. The house needed air. 3 months after the deed was corrected, my Aunt Helen invited everyone to dinner. She was my mother's older sister, a retired school counselor who could make a meal feel like a hearing without ever raising her voice. I did not want to go. Priya told me I had no legal reason to attend or avoid it. The decision was mine. That mattered more than she knew. I went because I was tired of imagining conversations happening about me when I was not there. I went because I wanted to see whether I could sit in the same room as my parents without giving away more than I intended. Tessa had moved into the apartment. She had started work at the florist. Ivy had a small room with a yellow lamp and a window facing a parking lot. It was not the life Tessa had pictured, but it was hers, and she was beginning to build it honestly. At dinner, Dad behaved as if nothing had happened. That was his version of repair. My mother was quieter. She asked whether I wanted wine. I said no. She looked relieved at the simplicity of that answer. After dessert, Aunt Helen asked me how work was going. Dad interrupted before I could answer. "Mara has been very busy with her lawyer," he said. The table went still. I put down my fork. "The case is over. The court confirmed I am the sole owner of my house." My mother said, "There was never any need to say it like that." "Say what?" "Like we tried to steal from you." I looked at her. I had rehearsed this conversation in my head 100 times, but when it arrived I was calm. "You used a limited power of attorney to transfer my home to Tessa. Then Dad tried to refinance it. I did not say you were criminals. I said what happened." Dad leaned back in his chair. "We were trying to keep your sister and niece housed. You could have asked me to help. You would have made conditions." "Yes," I said. "Because it was my house." My Aunt Helen cleared her throat. "Did Mara know before Tessa moved in?" No one answered immediately. That small silence did more work than any speech I could have made. Tessa finally said, "No, she didn't." Dad stared at his plate. Mom looked at Tessa as if she had broken a rule. I did not enjoy the moment. I did not feel victorious. I felt tired and sad and oddly free. The truth was no longer something I had to carry alone, while everyone else called it a misunderstanding. Helen said, "Then you should have asked her." Dad shrugged. "We thought we were doing what family does." "Family does not erase names from deeds," Helen said. Nobody spoke after that. The words were plain. They were not cruel. They were simply impossible to argue with. Later, my mother cornered me by the coat rack. Her eyes were wet. "I worry that you are going to punish us forever," she said. I looked at her for a long time. I wanted to say that she had already punished herself by choosing this. Instead, I said, "I am not deciding forever tonight. I am deciding what is safe now." She nodded as if she understood. I did not know whether she did. When I left, Tessa walked me to my car. She said, "Thank you for helping with the apartment." "Ivy deserves stability," I said. "So do you." I drove home slowly. I had not expected that sentence from her. It did not repair everything. It was not supposed to. But it was the first thing anyone in my family had said that made room for both of us. There was one more conversation at the dinner that I had not expected. My cousin Rachel found me in the hallway while everyone was putting coats on. "I didn't know," she said. "Dad told us Tessa was staying with you because you had offered." I believed her. That was another cost of what happened. Every person my parents told a softened version had been given a story in which I was either generous or unreasonable. Neither version allowed me to be the owner of my own decision. "I didn't offer," I said. Rachel nodded slowly. "I understand now. That should have been a simple thing." Felt enormous. At the door, Dad stopped me. He did not block my way. "That was new," he said. "I know you think I treated you differently." I waited. "I thought you were the strong one," he continued. "I thought you would understand why Tessa needed us." "I did understand she needed help," I said. "I did not understand why you thought that meant you could take my home." He rubbed one hand over his face. "I did not think you would lose it forever. You recorded it in her name and asked about borrowing against it. What did you think I would have left?" He looked down. For the first time, he did not answer with family or sacrifice or some version of how much better I was at surviving than my sister. He only said, "I don't know." It was not an apology. It was less than one. But it was the first time he had admitted there was a question he could not talk his way around. I did not reward him for it. I did not tell him everything would be fine. I said, "That is the problem. You made decisions about my life without knowing what they would cost me." Then I left. The drive home was quiet. I passed the bakery above Priya's office, closed for the night, and the grocery store parking lot where I had called Tessa after the move. The city had continued moving while my family story changed shape. It helped to see familiar places untouched by it. When I reached my house, I stood in the driveway for a minute before going in. The porch light came on automatically. I had replaced the bulb myself the week before. That tiny practical detail made me happy. Inside, the rooms were not completely restored. There were small scuffs where furniture had been dragged. A closet smelled faintly of another detergent. I could have repainted everything immediately. Instead, I left it alone for a while. I wanted to live in the house before I made it perfect again. I wanted my body to learn that no one was about to appear with a box and a label and tell me I had to make room. Before the dinner, I had made a decision that surprised even me. I would not bring documents. I would not rehearse a statement. I would answer questions if they were asked, but I would not arrive prepared to prosecute my family across Aunt Helen's table. That choice was not softness. It was discipline. I had already said what needed to be said in the places where records mattered. I did not owe a courtroom presentation to people who had ignored the first explanation. Still, I was nervous. In the car outside Helen's house, I checked my phone twice and nearly drove away. Denise had offered to stay available. I texted her only, "Going in now." She replied, "Leave when you want. You do not need a reason." At dinner, I noticed how carefully everyone avoided the subject at first. My mother brought a salad. Dad refilled water glasses. My cousin Rachel talked about a new job. The effort to be normal was so visible it made the room feel less normal. When Dad made his comment about my lawyer, the old Mara would have laughed lightly and changed the subject. I knew that reflex. It was the reflex that said peace was more important than accurate language. But Dad had counted on that reflex when he signed the deed. He had counted on me preferring discomfort to conflict. So I answered plainly. I did not insult him. I did not raise my voice. I stated the court outcome because it was true. After Aunt Helen asked whether I had known, I watched my parents sit in the silence. That silence became important to me later. It was the first time I understood that I did not have to fill every pause so someone else could escape it. Tessa's answer changed the room. She did not make excuses. She said I had not known. My mother looked wounded, but a wound is not always proof of injustice. Sometimes it is the feeling of a story losing its cover. In the kitchen later, Aunt Helen asked whether I had a place to stay during the dispute. I told her about Denise's apartment and the hotel. Helen's face tightened. You were paying for a hotel while they were living in your house? She asked. For a while. She nodded, then said, Your mother told me you preferred to be away because you needed space. I almost laughed. Even my distance had been repackaged as a preference. I needed space because I did not feel safe staying there, I said. Helen did not offer a speech. She put her hand over mine once, briefly. That was enough. When I told Mom I was deciding what was safe now, I meant more than visits and phone calls. I meant that the future of our relationship would depend on whether she could hear a boundary without trying to turn it into cruelty. I had no timeline for that. I was done creating one-sided deadlines for my own healing. The practical work of rebuilding my life was quiet. It did not look like revenge. It looked like passwords, paperwork, and decisions I should have made years earlier. I changed the locks. I changed the garage code. I removed my parents as emergency contacts on the insurance policy and at the hospital. I created a new estate plan with an attorney who had no connection to my family. I put the original house documents in a fireproof box and stored digital copies in more than one place. I also stopped explaining every decision. I had been trained to provide a defense before anyone accused me. After the house, I learned that reasons could become openings. So when Dad called to ask whether I could help pay for a repair at their house, I said, I can't do that. He asked why. I said, it doesn't work for me. The conversation ended after 40 seconds. I felt guilty for the rest of the day. Then I remembered that guilt was not evidence that I had done anything wrong. Sometimes it was just the feeling of acting differently from the role people expected. Tessa and I rebuilt more slowly. She paid me back for nothing because I had not given her a loan. She did not send grand apologies every week. She got up, went to work, picked up Ivy, and paid rent on a home that was actually hers to occupy. One afternoon, she sent me a photograph of Ivy's room. There was a paper sun taped to the wall and a stack of library books on the floor. I typed, "It looks good." Tessa replied she likes it because no one can take it away from her. I stared at the message. Then I wrote, "Keep it that way." My parents wanted things to return to normal sooner than I did. My mother invited me for Sunday dinner twice. I declined twice. The third time I went for 90 minutes and drove myself. I did not bring the old version of myself with me, the one who stayed until midnight because leaving might disappoint someone. Dad was polite. He did not apologize. I stopped waiting for him to. There were moments when I missed them terribly. You can be right and still grieve. But I did not miss being watched for what I could provide. One evening, I sat on my porch with a glass of water and watched the last leaves come down from the maple across the street. The house was quiet. Not lonely. Quiet. I thought about the first night, when Dad had offered me a room in their house as if I were the temporary one. I thought about how close I had come to believing I had to accept it in order to prove I was loving. Love without consent is not help. Help without respect becomes control. I still loved my parents in the complicated way adult children sometimes do. I loved the people they had been in other moments. I loved the fact that they had raised me to work hard, even if they later resented what that work gave me. But I no longer gave them access to the parts of my life they had shown they could misuse. That was not revenge. It was the cost of truth. In the weeks after the settlement, I made a list of things I would still do for family. I did it because I did not want my fear to harden into a rule that everyone was dangerous and every request was manipulation. I would bring soup when someone was sick. I would pick Ivy up from school if Tessa had an emergency. I would listen when someone needed to talk. I would give money only when I chose the amount, the purpose, and the limit. I would not co-sign a lease, a car loan, or a credit card. I would not give anyone access to my accounts. I would not let someone use my address without asking. I would not surrender a boundary because another person called it selfish. The list was not a legal document. It was a promise to myself. One Saturday, Mom called while I was pruning the rosemary behind the garage. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then I answered. "I found some of your old school papers," she said. "Do you want them?" It was such an ordinary question that I had to sit down on the back step. "Yes," I said. "You can mail them." There was a pause. She had probably expected an invitation to come over. I did not offer one. "I have been thinking," she said. "I should not have signed that deed." I held the phone tighter. The apology I had wanted had become so small by then that I almost missed it. "No," I said. "You should not have." She waited for me to make it easier. I did not. "I was afraid for Tessa," she said. "You were afraid. And you still made a choice." "I know." That was all. We did not resolve our relationship in the garden. We did not cry together. But she had named the act without calling it a mistake that happened by itself. That was a beginning. When he did, he asked whether I had hired someone to fix the fence. I said I was getting estimates. He gave me an opinion about fence posts, then stopped himself halfway through and said, "You know what you're doing?" I said, "Yes." The conversation lasted 3 minutes. It did not heal anything. But it did not ask me to surrender anything either. Tessa and I developed a different rhythm. She did not make me the first person she called when her life went wrong. She called her landlord about repairs. She spoke to the school about forms. She arranged childcare with a neighbor who traded pickup days. Once she told me she had nearly asked Dad to put something in his name for her, then stopped. "I didn't want another shortcut," she said. I told her that was wise. I did not say I was proud. Pride had been used too often in our family to mean obedience. But I was glad. I learned to be glad without needing to take responsibility for her outcome. The first holiday after the settlement was Thanksgiving. I did not go to my parents' house. I told them 2 weeks ahead without explanation. Mom replied with a sad face emoji. Then a message asking whether I was punishing them. I put the phone down. I made a pie for Denise and her wife instead. Their table was crowded with people who had nowhere else to go. A resident from the hospital, a neighbor who had recently divorced, Denise's brother, and 2 children arguing about cranberry sauce. No one asked me to explain my family. No one expected me to perform gratitude for being included. I helped wash dishes and went home before midnight because I was tired. The next day, Dad left a voicemail. He said the empty chair at their table had been hard. He did not say he understood why it was empty. He said it had been hard. I saved the message, then deleted it 2 days later. I did not need to preserve every feeling he sent me. The legal evidence had needed a folder. My life did not. In December, Tessa invited me and Ivy to a small holiday concert at her apartment building. I almost declined. Then I remembered that boundaries were not meant to make my world smaller than it had to be. I went for 40 minutes. Ivy sang one line too early and then hid her face in Tessa's sweater. Tessa laughed, embarrassed and proud. Her apartment was warm. There were paper snowflakes in the windows and a small tree beside the television. Before I left, Tessa gave me a sealed envelope. Inside was a copy of the final rent receipt and a note saying she had paid every bill that month on time. She was not asking for approval. She was showing me that she was building a life she could carry herself. "I don't need you to respond," she said. "I just wanted you to know I am trying." "I know," I said. That was all. I did not promise a future I could not yet picture. I did not close the distance all at once. But I let the moment be good. After I came home, I put her note in a drawer rather than the fireproof box. The box held the crisis. The drawer held the things that might someday become ordinary. I also began going back to the parts of my life I had paused. I joined a Sunday morning walking group near the river. I repainted the office. I planned a short trip to Montreal, This time because I wanted to see the city again and not because work required it. Each decision was small. Together, they changed the emotional map of the story. My house was no longer only the place I had nearly lost. It became a place from which I could leave and return by choice. 6 months after the court entered the stipulated judgment, Tessa mailed me a letter. Not a text. A real letter. In an envelope with a return address from her apartment. She wrote that the florist had promoted her to manage weekend events. She wrote that Ivy had made a friend in the building, and was learning to ride a bicycle without training wheels. Then she wrote the part one had not expected. I used being scared as an excuse not to ask what I knew I should ask. I am sorry I let them make your home into my solution. There was no request attached to it. No demand that I forgive her. No attempt to make me comfort her for feeling guilty. I put the letter in the fireproof box with the house documents. Not because it belonged with the legal papers, but because it marked the end of a record I never wanted to create. That weekend, I replaced the old brass nameplate beside my front door. It had only the family surname from when I bought the house because I had never thought much about it. I chose a simple black plaque with 2 words on it. Mara Ellis. When I screwed it into place, I remembered my father saying they had fixed the deed. He had thought a recorded paper, a key in Tessa's hand, and enough confidence could make my home belong to someone else. They had forgotten that my name was still on the deed. More importantly, they had forgotten that I knew what my name meant. It meant the money I saved when no one was looking. It meant the evenings I spent comparing mortgage rates. It meant the roof I replaced, the patients I helped move through a crowded hospital, the rooms I painted one wall at a time. It meant I could love my sister without giving her my house. It meant I could care about my parents without allowing them to make decisions for me. And it meant that when I stepped inside and locked my own front door, I was no longer asking anyone to agree that I belonged there. I already knew. There was one final piece of mail from the title company about 6 weeks later. It was a simple letter confirming that the corrective deed, affidavit, and stipulated judgment had been recorded and that their file was closed. I read it at the dining room table. In the beginning, every official envelope had made my heart race. This one did too, but only until I reached the second paragraph. The letter did not say justice. It did not say betrayal. It said the recorded title records had been updated to reflect the judgment. That was enough. A system had done what systems are supposed to do when people bring it clear facts. It had not given me back trust. It had given me back a truthful public record. I called Priya to thank her. She laughed softly and said, "You did the hard part. You kept records. You stopped debating the facts. You followed through." I told her I had spent months feeling like I was overreacting. That feeling is common when the people who crossed a boundary keep calling the boundary unreasonable, she said. It does not make them right. After we hung up, I walked through each room. The upstairs office was mine again. I moved my grandmother's photographs back from the closet and put them on the floor beside the desk. I did not force myself to sort them that day. I just wanted them where I had chosen to keep them. In the kitchen, I found one of Ivy's old crayon drawings behind the refrigerator. It was a yellow house with a big red door and 4 uneven windows. I considered throwing it away, then placed it in an envelope addressed to Tessa. I wrote one line on a note. The letters were plain. I had chosen them because I did not want anything ornate or sentimental. But I stopped on the porch anyway. My parents had thought the deed was a technical thing they could arrange around me. They had forgotten that records have histories, that authority has limits, and that a person who has spent years building a life can learn to defend it. They had forgotten my name was still on the deed. And I had nearly forgotten something too. I had nearly forgotten that I did not need to become hard to protect myself. I only needed to become clear. I locked the door behind me and went to work. That evening there was rain. Not a storm, just the steady gray kind that makes the porch boards darken and the streetlights come on early. I came home carrying a paper bag with vegetables and a loaf of bread, and for a moment I stood under the awning listening to water hit the gutter. Nothing was waiting for me. No rental truck. No boxes. No family argument vibrating through the walls. Just the key in my hand and the ordinary fact that it opened my own door. I made soup because the weather made me want something warm. While it simmered, I checked the mailbox and found a postcard from Ivy. She had drawn another yellow house. This time, beside it, she had drawn a smaller gray building with flowers in the window. On the back, in Tessa's handwriting, it said, "Ivy wanted you to see our new place. She says she likes that it has its own key." I looked at the drawing for a long time. Then I put it on my refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a lemon. I did not need Tessa's apartment to be mine in order to care that it was safe. I did not need to share an address with her to be her sister. Those were ideas I should have known earlier. It took losing the illusion of an easy family to understand them. Later, I walked through the dark house and turned off lights one by one. In the upstairs office, I opened the window a few inches and smelled wet soil from the garden. The fence still leaned. The front path still needed repair. There were bills in a bowl by the door and a bathroom tile I kept meaning to replace. The house was not perfect. It was not a prize. It was my responsibility and my refuge both at once. I had spent months thinking the ending would be a judgment or a signature, or the moment someone finally admitted I was right. It was none of those things. The ending was simpler. I could close my door without fear that the people I loved had already decided what was behind it belonged to someone else. And when I said no after that, I no longer heard it as the end of love. I heard it as the sound of my own life being mine. Months later, I drove past the pharmacy where Tessa lived and saw Ivy's yellow lamp glowing in the upstairs window. I did not stop. I did not need to inspect whether they were okay. Tessa had learned how to call for help without handing over responsibility, and I had learned how to care without taking charge. At home, I put a new plant on the front step. It was a small evergreen in a heavy pot, the kind that would need to be brought inside if the temperature dropped too far. I bought it because I liked it, not because it symbolized anything. But when I watered it, I thought about all the things a home asks of you. Attention, repairs, records, patience. It asks you to notice what is loose before it breaks. It asks you to decide what belongs and what does not. That was what I had learned from the deed. Ownership was not a feeling my parents could grant or withdraw. It was a fact supported by work, choices, records, and the willingness to defend a boundary when someone tested it. I never got the apology I once imagined. Dad became more careful around me, but he never said the full sentence. Mom said she was sorry, then sometimes slipped back into the language of family emergencies and impossible choices. I stopped waiting for a perfect account of what happened. Their limitations were theirs to live with. My own work was simpler. I kept my documents where I could find them. I chose help that was freely given. I accepted that love could survive only if it learned to respect the word no. On the first warm day of spring, I finally hired someone to straighten the back fence. The contractor asked whether I wanted it reinforced or replaced. I looked at the posts, thought about the years ahead, and chose reinforced. It would hold. It did not need to become a different house to be secure. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the old deed on one side and the final judgment on the other. I did not need to read them again. I had read them enough to know every phrase that mattered. The first deed marked the beginning of my ownership. The judgment corrected the attempt to take it away. Between them was a year of ordinary choices made visible. Saving, signing, refusing, recording, asking questions, and finally saying no. I placed both documents in the fireproof box and closed the lid. Then I washed the dinner dishes, set the coffee maker for morning, and turned out the kitchen light. The house was quiet around me. It was mine and I was home.